and welcome to another edition of Trader Talk TV. Today we're talking about specialist DSPs and why it's important for agencies to use them. I've got Álvaro from TapTap in the office. Álvaro, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
And before we jump into that, I'm going to ask Álvaro just to introduce himself and talk a little bit about TapTap.
Okay, so I'm Álvaro Mayol. I'm General Manager of TapTap, but I used to be Chief Product Officer, so pretty product knowledgeable.
Yeah.
I guess that's why we're doing this. And TapTap is an area-based omni-channel DSP that uses location intelligence as a different factor for value add.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that whole generalist DSP versus specialist DSP, but I want to talk about a little bit about TapTap because you kind of built your business around geo and location, right? And obviously this is a huge area that's kind of evolved over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, particularly with GDPR and sort of privacy. I want to talk about the evolution of that force and talk about the importance of that signal as a business. So how has sort of location geo evolved beyond the sort of SDK and mobiles and sort of the identity graph? Where is it now? Talk a little bit about, as a business, how you've sort of evolved that product. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how you use location as an anchor sort of signal to build other signals around it. So let's just talk about that evolution thing first around geolocation.
Sure. I mean, before we were using device IDs and cookies as a signal to actually target people. And as you said, GDPR and other business-related concepts like the deprecation or opt-out of devices ID from Apple and stuff like that have actually make it quite complicated to use them as an anchor or as a decisioning factor for targeting, which is at the end of the day what we use IDs for. And we've found out that location is a really good way to actually reference data to and aggregate data from a privacy first perspective. We don't need to relate to that ID or that user to actually target them. So for us, if you use if we actually divide the world into little squares, which we call geohashes, all of these are fixed. So this is area 1, area 2, area 3, and area 4. We can actually aggregate information or its data signals that are both audience or non-audience related or online and offline related. So for example, the number of men that are in the census data here, you have actually a number of men here. So I'm going to different signals we can get. So for example, we can get demographics data, but we can also get purchase data. So for example, number of purchases on restaurants in a particular area. We have that from MasterCard data, for example. And we can actually aggregate other business-related data like sales from a store, weather, mobility, traffic. So at the end of the day, all of these things happen in a specific place, and we can aggregate that information to use it later on to generate what we call a geo index. Right.
And then that data, then you sort of build segmentation to sort of target the sort of prospective audience in your DSP. So it sort of gives a process around that. So how does it sort of work from a sort of activation point of view?
Yeah, so we use location for once we have defined what we call a geo index, and we'll take a look at how we do that now. We use that for smarter planning, activation, and reporting, and it just gives a scale, like we said, on a privacy first approach. And for example, I don't know if I can raise this, but
sure.
Let me explain what a geo index is. And for me, again, these are the same areas. We can say it's a geohash, or it can be postal codes.
Yeah.
Right? And the way we do this is pretty much kind of like a location DMP. So imagine that here we're putting total population numbers.
Yeah.
So we got 10 people here, we got 100 people here, we got 1,000 people here, we got 10,000 people here.
Yeah.
Right? These are absolute numbers, right? But imagine I use here number of sales from a store. I know my store here, how many sales did it do? I'm just going to put, again, rough numbers. Let's say 50, 100, 200, and then I'm going to put here 150. Right. The good thing about location is that even though there are two different natures of data, one is people, the other one is number of purchases, we can normalize data and turn them into a score from 0 to 100. So for example, this would be, if I change it into a score really quickly, This is the maximum, would be 100%, 100, sorry. This would be 70, 30, 0. For me, what I'm doing is 100 being the most, 0 being the least, and then we have an average of 50, right?
Yeah.
If I do the same thing, I normalize the data from these aspects. Remember, this is purchase or sales data.
Yeah.
And this is population. Right, really quickly. This would be 100. This would be 70. It would be 30. And there would be 0. If I combine these two now, because now I can actually combine them, because there's an index. This is my result, and sorry, I'm going to invade your space.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is my final index. It would be, this would be 100. This would be 70. 30, 0. Actually, I have, I actually chose involuntarily the same aspect. The idea is, if I were to use a threshold here, what we have is, in all these different 4 areas that we have here, we both have people and we have purchases, right? Now what we can do is actually be efficient and say, okay, I'm only going to be using areas that are 50 plus on my index. I will remove those 2 areas, and I will be choosing this as my decisioning for planning. Yeah. Once I have those 2 areas, I can decide whether or not I want to activate one channel, another I can do out of home. I can look for out of home billboards. I can look for POIs. I can activate mobile phones. I can do connected TV, right? So this would be my planning decision.
A lot of this informs the planning process, before you even start the campaigns across the different channels you want to activate the media.
Yeah, and the good thing is you can aggregate any data dimension to it. That when we normalize it, everything that we say, everything happens somewhere. Yeah. True. In fact, it does. So this could be purchases. It could be traffic. Yeah. And there's a place where there's more traffic than others. So what we do is normalize it relative to location. These locations are always fixed. This code will never change like cookies do. Yeah. Right? Cookies can change. They can be altered. Yeah. So from there on, something that actually locks or connects with the rest of the channels is this. Once I made my planning decision, then it's when it becomes the real-time activation. And that's different ways we approach or use location. Yeah.
Obviously, location geo is a really important signal post-cookie, right? We're talking about, the deprecation of third-party cookies. We're not going to have third-party signal, right? I want to talk about sort of how you as a company use location geo as an anchor to bring in other signals. You talked about how you use context, for instance. So talk a little bit about that. I want to know how you use that sort of signal to kind of use the likes of context and other other signals to kind of like build a scalable campaign and real-time campaign.
Sure. One of the things that we said before is like there's no cookies on out of home. No. There's no cookies on traditional TV. Well, they are claiming we have some sort of cookies on TV, but it's I don't know if they're working or not.
I'm not sure if they're working.
So one of the things we believe that location needs to work out. It works for all media channels, especially offline and now the new digital media channels all together. We said before that we use location for planning purposes. If we go back to our matrix here, we said 100. 70, we're going to say we're going to target area 3, area 4. Yeah. In these 2 areas, like we said, we have always all different channels. We have mobile devices running by here. We got digital home billboards. We got TVs, our neighborhoods, stuff like that. Our planning decision is based on historical data analysis. So we aggregate the data, but that is always from a present perspective because you plan ahead. So other DSPs use this planning process as static. Yeah. The decisions you make remain like that throughout the campaign. Yeah. And for us, we believe that location serves as that anchor for the planning, but when you put time into it, it becomes context. So for us, context is a mixture of location and time. You're quoting Stephen Hawking for that. But we believe that this number here, if we imagine that this area here and this 70 was, remember, I want to say people, let's say that the target is men 25 to 45, and where purchases are high. This means on a 70, it's a high index for that area, right? So if we were to actually look this on a temporal line, and this is 0, and this is 70, when we make the planning decision, we say that area has a 70, which is above the threshold, right? But when we start integrating dynamic signals, real-time signals, for example, traffic, mobility, we got APIs that link into events. So there's a football match, there's a concert, there's a stadium. That line is not constant anymore. So when we put time, and this is like, say, 24 hours in a day, that 70 just changes throughout time, right? So imagine that, okay, 70 is the decision we chose because it was about 50, but sometimes that area becomes a 50 and we don't want it. Sometimes it becomes 100, like this one, and we still want it. So for us, this is the contextual decisioning that when you put the time and close to the place, then you can make real-time decisions whether or not I should buy the ad or change the ad. For example, when this variable is on top of 70 and it's close to 100, I might change the ad or the creative, and it might say something. I always say a real simple example about context is if it's raining, I'll buy the ad.
Right.
But because it rains somewhere. That's a really simple context. But another context could be...
So basically, the context, whatever it might be, right? Time, place, weather, et cetera, changes sort of the targets you can go for, like sort of optimizes sort of the buying sort of landscape. So this is never static when you add in an event-based sort of thing. So if your KPIs and we want to target for the European Championships and it's a Heineken or a Carlsberg piece, this is going to be evolving all the time. And this is where you buy your traffic because you're going to hit the people, the right people, the right time effectively.
Yeah, you just keep in mind when you plan offline media like out of home, you buy the billboards for a month.
Yeah.
And you're building coverage. You're building your reach over time. Yeah. Sometimes you're wasting that reach. For example, at night, there might not be people to actually reach. We have that same planning approach, whereas we make sure that the location defines my target, my demographics, my interest. But then context makes it more efficient and more effective. Yeah. So normally we do this kind of approach and say, okay, remember we had 30 and 0 here. Yeah. There's still men in this area. Yeah. Right? So what I might do is just, if I have a budget of 100, I might spend 70% of my budget on the high affinity areas and 30% on the low. I'm still working for my reach and my coverage, but I'm being efficient. I don't want to waste, if I can be more impactful in this time frames here, I will be, right? But I'm still buying everything. So it's kind of like, that's the approach that our context system brings on activation. But like I said before, it could be a really good performance evolution on creative ads. Like, why do you use this ad instead of this one? Sometimes even adding context to the creative. Like we did this summer a couple campaigns for UV index related ads. And when it was above 10, which is you're going to be burning alive in the street, then you actually make sure that in the ad says, right now, the sun is really dangerous. You should get some sunscreen. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of approach. Yeah, yeah. I
want to talk about just the platform in general, right? You sort of push this into market as a DSP solution. Yeah. And obviously, you've got many agencies using probably two sort of typical DSPs, the DV360 Trade Desk. But there is room for specialism. We want to talk about that, like, because you talk about not only do you have something unique in terms of signal, it's just the full sort of loop of planning and sort of informing the planning process, as well as just, as the signal itself. So talk about that necessary sort of space you want to have for a specialist DSP at agency or brands.
Of course we are a DSP, and normally when you're an activator, you end up being tagged by something. You're either a mobile DSP, an out-of-home DSP. There are little omni-channel DSPs out there, like truly omni-channel. And we are truly omni-channel in the fact that you can buy any digital, so you can do Connect TV, digital home, audio, mobile, desktop. When we brought in the planning tool within DSP, which is unusual to have a planning mapping tool within a DSP, it was always weird. Like, what is this? Like, where can I put my tag and my HTML file? So at the end of the day, it's a DSP, but it's also a planning tool. And on the reporting, it's kind of like an insights BI tool. So it's complicated to ingest that into the media agencies, what they're used to, or client services team, operations team. They're used to a standard DSP that just, here's my media plan, here's my tag, and that's it. It just allowed us to actually become more present in conversations before the activation. So now we're speaking to the guys that are planning the campaigns, but sometimes you're even speaking to even previous to the planning side, you're speaking to the head of digital around, hey, what are the objectives for this brand and how I can actually use all of their media planning decisions into a map. So for example, a good example about connected TV campaigns we're executing right now, agencies are giving us their GRPs by Providence or city, and we plug that into the tool and say, okay, linear TV planning can be used as a trigger to say, in the areas you're not reaching with your linear TV, I'll go with connected TV or video. You know what I mean? So it means that we are, starting to speak prior to the chain that would a normal DSP would be. That sometimes makes it complicated, but also on the reporting side, there's so many different aspects we can provide from our reporting about insights that, for example, in a campaign, we can rank the postal codes by VTR or CTR, and those make performance decisions for next campaign. So it will help the planning process for your future campaigns, because I'll let you know what areas are performing better so that you can take them into account for your future campaign. Right? So, I mean, it's some of the things and some of the challenges we have right now in the ecosystem. Like I said, digital home, connected TV, the devices IDs, cookies, traditional DMPs. They can't play in those spaces. Basically. They don't. They claim they are, because now we have universal IDs. But it's there is no thing. Yeah. So I guess it allows for the agencies, advertisers to have different tools to reach the results that they need. And some of the advertisers, specific verticals like retail, they take advantage of this so much, because a retail, at the end of the day, is kind of like real estate. The importance of the retail on this physical store is so important. But it's not only about physical stores. We are mapping the behavior on e-commerce by postal code. Right. So we understand where people actually, what products, what added to the cart by postal code. Yeah. And you can use that as a decisioning to actually drive physical store visits. Like I said before, planning on TV can be an input. At the end of the day, we can input pretty much everything from a physical digital world. And those are really interesting leverages or levers or triggers to actually make decisions on why I should buy specific media channels on those. And is it easier now to have this conversation post-cookie? I mean, I expect a lot of people are going, right, I need solutions there. You kind of use location as a new proxy for buying. If you think about it, a lot of when people are leaning into Chrome cookies or IDs that don't scale at all. So are those conversations getting easier, or how are agencies approaching that? Interesting. I guess they are. Sometimes not, because people say post-cookie, but suddenly Google said, no, we're not getting cookies out. But eventually it's going anywhere. They're giving the user the choice, so they're going to probably deprecate it on their own. So they deprecate it or not, the fact that the usefulness of the cookies and IDs are just getting lower and lower. So at the end of the day, I think the whole Adtech ecosystem is simplifying, and they need solutions like this. So context is one of them, but the traditional context being out there in the market is more about online content. Context. So we believe that. But you're thinking of context as sort of like real-time events, you're talking about weather, you're talking about actual sort of physical or sporting events, or what it might be that influence people's attitudes across the space. Yeah, that's our focus on it, or our angle on it. It's we believe that, for example, channels like digital home, that is location. Yeah, completely. Right, but when you actually try to reference to it, it's no, it's not location. It's there's no SDK related to an out-of-home, but an out-of-home billboard, it's somewhere. And it's somewhere because of the fact that you reach a certain target. Yeah. But you reach it over time. It's kind of like a brute force, frequency. This is just like that. It's just like an evolution of the branding effect that you gain with TV, out-of-home, and digital. Because digital always was a one-on-one deal. Yeah. And I don't think that's going to be true in the future anymore. Yeah. Okay.
Quick question on generalist versus specialism. So why is it important to have a specialist DSP versus a generalist one?
Well, at the end of the day, generalist DSPs cannot do it all.
Yeah.
You know, as a specialty DSP, we focus on bringing different or new solutions to solve new challenges and problems. So I guess that there's space for us to innovate and bring value to agencies and advertisers that perhaps most of the generalists don't actually focus because they need to bring so much more scale into
they're trying to bite off a lot of problems where you're like super focused on a
Yeah, at the end of the day, with being a generalist, you stop being innovative. And innovation is fundamental when in a world like this. So us proposing things around location, artificial intelligence around location, all that kind of stuff needs to be really quick and adaptable to the new ecosystem.
Brilliant. Well, Álvaro, thank you for bringing us through that. Thank you for talking about the evolution of geolocation. And great insight into the reason why agencies should be looking beyond just the two sort of vanilla DSPs and looking at specialists in the market. So thanks, Álvaro. We'll probably see you next time and talk a bit more about location.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And that was Trader Talk TV, and we will see you next time.